Let me tell you about the most celebrated robbery in modern European history. A theft so perfect, so beautifully executed, that the victims actually cheered while it happened. They waved flags, they cried tears of joy. They danced on the rubble of a wall while their future was being sold out from under them. November 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall falls. The world watches in awe. Families reunited after decades. Freedom triumphs over tyranny. Democracy defeats communism. It's one of the most iconic moments of the 20th century. A moment so powerful that it still brings tears to people's eyes. And almost everything you think you know about what happened next is a carefully constructed lie. Because the fall of the Berlin Wall wasn't just the end of division. It was the beginning of the largest economic annexation in modern history. It was the moment when 16 million people became a market, when an entire nation's assets became inventory, when freedom became a transaction, and nobody talks about the price. West Germany didn't reunify with East Germany. Let's get that straight right now. West Germany absorbed East Germany, consumed it, digested it. There's a difference between a marriage and a hostile takeover. And what happened to the German Democratic Republic was the most efficient corporate acquisition ever conducted. They just called it democracy. Here's what actually happened. The moment the wall came down, West German businesses saw opportunity. Not opportunity for Germans, opportunity for profit. East Germany had factories, had infrastructure, had trained workers who earned a fraction of Western wages, had real estate that could be bought for pennies, had an entire economy that could be dismantled and resold. So they created an institution. A beautiful German word for it. Treuhandanstalt, the trust agency. Sounds innocent, doesn't it? Almost caring. An agency you could trust. Its job was to privatize the entire East German economy. Every factory, every business, every piece of state-owned property. And it did exactly that. It sold everything. The Treuhandanstalt became the largest industrial enterprise in the world overnight. It controlled over 8,000 companies, employed 4 million people, owned 40,000 pieces of real estate, and within 4 years, almost all of it was gone. Sold, liquidated, closed. You want to know where the money went? Western buyers acquired East German companies for almost nothing. Factories that had employed entire towns were shut down. Equipment was shipped west or scrapped. Land was sold to developers. The workers, they got unemployment benefits. And a lesson in capitalism they'd never forget. The numbers are staggering. When the Treuhandanstalt closed its doors in 1994, it had accumulated debts of over 200 billion Deutsche Marks. Let me say that again. The agency created to sell East German assets ended up owing 200 billion marks. How do you sell everything a country has and end up in massive debt? You do it when the goal was never to build. The goal was to eliminate competition. West German industry didn't want East German factories producing goods. They wanted those factories closed. They wanted those markets captured. And that's exactly what they got. But it started even earlier, with a decision so catastrophic that economists still argue about it today: the currency conversion. When reunification happened, East Germans traded their Ostmarks for Deutsche Marks. The exchange rate, 1-to-1 for savings up to a certain amount, 1-to-2 for larger amounts and business accounts. Sounds fair, right? It was economic murder. The East German mark was worth maybe a quarter of the Deutsche Mark on real terms, maybe less, but politicians wanted a feel-good moment. They wanted East Germans to feel like equals, so they gave them a currency conversion that made their savings look respectable. And in doing so, they made their labor impossibly expensive overnight, made their products uncompetitive instantly, made their entire economy worthless in a single financial decision. Imagine you're running an East German factory. Yesterday, you paid workers in Ostmarks. Your products were cheap, your exports competitive. Today, you're paying workers in Deutsche Marks. Your labor costs have quadrupled, but your products haven't gotten any better. Your machines are still outdated. Your distribution networks don't exist in the West. Who's going to buy from you now? Nobody. That's who? Helmut Kohl promised blooming landscapes in the East. That's what he actually said, blooming landscapes. Within 3 to 5 years, the East would flourish. What bloomed instead was unemployment. What flourished was despair. Towns that had existed for generations around single factories became ghost towns. Young people fled west for jobs. The elderly stayed behind and watched everything they'd built disappear. And here's the thing nobody mentions. East Germany wasn't just communist poverty. Yes, it had problems, serious problems. Political oppression, shortages, environmental disasters, but it also had full employment. It had childcare that Western women still don't have. It had job security. It had a social contract that said, you belong here, you matter, you have a role. Was it real? Was it sustainable? Those are fair questions. But what replaced it wasn't freedom. It was competition against an economy that had been building capital for 40 years while the East was isolated. It was a race where one side started at the finish line. If you're finding this perspective interesting, if you've never heard this side of the story, do me a favor and subscribe. Because the history they don't teach you matters. It explains why the world looks the way it does. And there's more to come. Let's talk about the solidarity tax. After reunification, West Germans started paying an extra tax, a surcharge on their income to fund the rebuilding of the East. It was supposed to be temporary. That was 1991. Germans are still paying it today, 35 years later. Billions upon billions of euros transferred from west to east. And still the economic gap persists. Over 2 trillion euros have been transferred to the former East Germany since reunification. 2 trillion. That's more money than most countries will ever see. And yet, wages in the East are still lower. Unemployment is still higher. Young people still leave. The blooming landscapes never fully bloomed. Why? Because transfer payments don't build economies. Investments build economies. And the investments that came to East Germany mostly came with strings attached. They came from Western companies that wanted markets, not competitors. That wanted consumers, not producers. That wanted labor, not partners. The brain drain was catastrophic. The best and brightest young East Germans did exactly what you'd expect them to do. They left. They went where the jobs were, where the opportunities were, where their education could actually earn them a living. And the towns they left behind? They aged, they shrank. They died slowly while the government sent checks. There's a German word for the feeling many East Germans have about this period. Nostalgia for the East. For the GDR, and Western commentators love to mock it. Oh, they miss their communist past. They miss their oppression. But that's not what they miss. They miss mattering. They miss the dignity of work. They miss being citizens of something, not just consumers of everything. The social fabric tore and never fully mended. Marriage rates collapsed. Birth rates plummeted. Suicide rates spiked. Alcoholism soared. All the metrics of human despair that economists don't like to put in their models went through the roof. Because it turns out you can't optimize human beings like you optimize supply chains. And here's where it connects to everything else. German reunification wasn't just a German story. It was a test case, a proof of concept. The same economic shock therapy that was applied to East Germany was applied across Eastern Europe. Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary, Russia. The same playbook. Rapid privatization, currency reforms. Open markets let the West in. Some countries managed it better than others. Some had more time. Some had leaders who pushed back. But the template was set in Germany. And the people who designed that template, they went on to design the European Union's economic policies. The most strict criteria, the austerity programs. The same logic that said East Germany needed to be converted overnight, said Greece needed to be punished for debt, said Spain needed structural reforms, said Italy needed to cut spending. Follow the logic, follow the institutions, follow the economists. It's the same people, the same ideas, the same belief that markets are smarter than humans, and humans just need to adjust. But humans don't adjust. Not like that, not that fast. They break instead. Today, 3.5 decades after reunification, the former East Germany is still poorer than the former West, still has lower productivity, still has fewer corporate headquarters, still has less wealth. The gap has narrowed. But it hasn't closed, and many economists now believe it never will. That the decisions made in 1990 created a structural inequality that has become permanent. The factories that could have been modernized were closed. The companies that could have been saved were sold. The workers who could have been retrained were discarded. And now, generations later, the grandchildren of those workers vote for parties that promise to burn the whole system down. Left and right, doesn't matter. The anger is real, the betrayal is remembered. They told us freedom would make us rich. That's what East Germans heard. Let go of your socialist fantasies, join the real world. And then the real world took everything and called it efficiency. Here's what I want you to understand. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a genuine moment of human triumph. People who had been separated for decades embraced their families. People who had lived in fear tasted freedom. That was real, that mattered. That deserves to be celebrated. But what came after? The economic decisions, the privatizations, the currency conversions, the systematic dismantling of an entire country's productive capacity? That wasn't freedom, that was business. And business doesn't care about family reunions. Business doesn't care about democratic aspirations. Business cares about returns. The West won the Cold War, and then it sent the bill to everyone else. You can see it today in AfD voting patterns that map almost perfectly onto the old East German border. You can see it in wage statistics, in migration patterns, in birth rates, in life expectancy, in every metric that measures whether humans are thriving or just surviving. The wall came down, and a different kind of wall went up, invisible this time, made not of concrete and wire, but of opportunity and capital, of networks and access, of whose voice gets heard in which rooms. They're still paying the solidarity tax. They're still sending money east. But you can't buy your way out of what happens when you tell 16 million people that everything they built was worthless, that their labor didn't count, that their lives needed to be reformatted like old hard drives. The Treuhandanstalt was supposed to be trustworthy. That's literally what the name means. An agency you could trust? It was run by people who believed they were doing the right thing, modernizing, optimizing, bringing the East into the 20th century. They weren't villains, they were technocrats. And that's almost worse, because they had spreadsheets instead of consciences. They had economic models instead of empathy. And they had the absolute certainty that markets know best. 35 years, 2 trillion euros, and still the scars remain. So the next time someone tells you the Berlin Wall fell and freedom won, nod politely. And then ask them what happened to all the factories. Ask them about the Treuhandanstalt. Ask them about the currency conversion and the blooming landscapes that never bloomed. Because the wall fell, but it landed on someone. It always lands on someone.